Welcome everyone to a new series from us here at CommonTime called CommonTime One on One. In CommonTime One on One, myself and other members of our team are going to go one on one with some of the incredible artists from our network that are doing the work out there in the field. Once again, this is a brand new interview series called CommonTime One on One. And in the spirit of those ones, with our first guest. How could I introduce him? So I know that he is a saxophonist, a veteran international music teacher, a professional cool guy, a professional llama spotter. He knows more llamas than I think that I ever will. And I'm talking about none other than my dear friend, the person who introduced me to international education. Who knew you could move to China from a Facebook post? None other than Lars Jefferson. Wow.
Hello.
Welcome. Lars Jefferson, our very first guest here on Common Time One on One. So, first, Lars, I just want to ask you sincerely, how are you doing? How are you really doing?
I'm doing all right. I've relocated back to the U.S. and making some changes, but really can't complain. Things are going well.
And you're out in Oregon? Out
Yes.
in Bigfoot country, eh?
No, they kind of live in the mountains. I'm down in the valley.
You're in the valley. Okay. And how's your mom doing? I know your family, everyone's doing okay.
Mom, how are you doing?
I'm fine. Hi, Michael.
She says she's
Hey,
fine. Hi, Michael.
mom's doing great. That's good to hear. So, first, Lars, like I said, we wanted to sit down with some artists and educators that are working in the arts field for us,
Mhm.
specifically music. And I kind of wanted to get an overview. Um, I tell people we were the first ones that were doing virtual learning, except
Mhm.
for full time e learning people. We were the
Mhm.
first people on lockdown, the first people using
Mhm.
Zoom and trying to do music. What was that like for you? Like, what was your experience doing virtual learning?
It was a big transition because I'm really more of a hands-on, like to get down, talk, and work with the kids and get things done. And let's add some more context here. So that was like January 2020.
Yeah.
We got the call, and they said we're going to be online um, in for they said, oh, for the first week. I was like, okay. The pandemic had just gotten started. Nobody really knew what was going on. And so we were using WeChat because we didn't have a platform.
Yeah.
Um, and then we tried some other things. And then eventually, I don't remember when we didn't have Zoom always. We had something else.
It was optional.
Yeah.
Like, because I was one of those that didn't really use Zoom in the beginning. I
Yeah.
was kind of just, hey, posting in the WeChat group, here's a task on manage back. Maybe we
Yeah.
had a
Yeah.
text discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Then they added in the Zoom. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, continue.
Yeah. And then we got the Zoom learning. And so after about 2 weeks of that, and it looked like the pandemic was heating up, and it didn't look like we were going back, I decided to come home. And I said, well, if I'm just going to be, I can either sit in my apartment all day and teach and not be able to leave, or I can go home and do the same thing, just on a 16-hour difference. So I came home, and then we had Zoom, and I sort of set up my chair and my stand and everything, and I had everything at my fingertips for what to do. Um, Now, one of the big change that I actually think was actually did some of the students did really well was when they weren't in school, and by that I mean they were at home, and so my conversations with them were more one on one. They weren't in front of their friends. Um, now you get the group dynamics that certain kids might not open up if they know their friends are watching, so you had good conversations there. Um, Also, certain kids just did a lot better without the distractions of the
Yeah.
school, and also because we were sort of this synchronous slash asynchronous thing at the time. um, the expectation was sort of like the assignment needed to get done. It didn't really matter when. um,
Right.
Certain students do really well with that, because you have certain students who come in and their brains are just not engaged at that time of day, or whatever. And so if they didn't get it done during the virtual session, they would turn something in and it would be good, and because they're doing it on their own time. When we went to in not in person to synchronous learning, with the Zoom, when they went back, that changed.
That was
Because,
a real shift. It was what
yeah,
you described as almost Montessori,
yeah.
kind of, because Montessori, they have these like targeted learning times,
Mhm.
but the students kind of have more freedom on how and when they're going to do it, as
Mhm.
long as they're doing it. But
Yeah,
I want to hear your thoughts on this transition to, because they went back to school in what, May,
yeah,
early
yeah. We
May.
had like 6 or 7 weeks in May to test it out.
So how do you feel about that? Because that was a whole different animal. Like once they went back and we were still virtual.
Yeah, we were still virtual because, just to add some context to this, China was not allowing anybody in at the time. So
Right. Still.
a bunch of people got stuck outside of the country, and
Mhm.
so we were still doing virtual. So I was like a disembodied head on a giant screen in my room, and you know. It, it's still not. It's like, well, tell the kids to look at the screen and do that. Well, they have a hard time doing that with an actual person in the room.
Right.
Even this one is just a screen. And like one of the biggest challenges we had, and if you're going to undertake this, you need to have a really strong teacher or somebody in the room who can keep the kids focused, because they're just going to sit there and they were not going to engage you the same as if you were in person. Um, so that was a huge undertaking. But fortunately for, I think, for you and I, we had by that last time, those last 5-6 weeks of school, our major assessments were already done and whatnot, because SDG week and some other things happened. Um, so it really wasn't that tough. When we got back together in, what was it, August 2020,
August.
that's when I really had to think about it, because
We
um,
had to actually start teaching music.
yeah, well, you had to teach. It's not like we weren't teaching music. It was that we had to actually introduce the concepts and all the teaching stuff,
Hmm.
while we're just a disembodied head. And that was a challenge. I went with a more of a still more project based approach. I tried some other things, but the tech platform issues, we were using what is it, Soundtrap and Hook Theory,
Yeah.
and in theory those work really well. But if you're not in the room to make sure the students can log on the right way and whatnot, and they're just not really confident in using it, doing that online was kind of a bust, especially if they just didn't have the self-management skills to either
Right.
to figure it out or to even ask how to use it.
How to do it. I know one thing that I always remember you said is that you told me that when you were maybe in your master's or sometime in there, they
Mhm.
told you like, hey, these students are going to know technology.
Oh yeah.
They're going to be digitally literate. You're the one that needs
Yeah,
to catch up.
yeah.
But what we found is that at least in our case was not really the case. I think maybe for other teachers too, this virtual learning kind of exposed that our students really don't know technology as well as we thought they did.
Yeah.
They know how to game and
Yeah.
they know social media, but I had to sit down and do a tutorial on copy and paste.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
one thing I heard you say that you were still taking a project-based approach, and you mentioned how once we got to that new school year in August 2020, you had to start introducing concepts again. And one takeaway that I kind of have from virtual learning, I love teaching music through performance, but when
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at the IB, you can really teach those concepts in a lot of other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I started focusing on how I could create some learning experience that were purely conceptual,
Mm-hmm.
not 100% music focused all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but something that were purely conceptual. You talked about using soundtrap and hook theory.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to still play music.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had this strategy of sound sharing
Mm-hmm.
audio files that I had made so that the
Yeah.
students could play at the same time, which in theory worked, but we went back to that self-management that you said.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just take trombone players, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Every trombone player in the world had an attention span of like 45 seconds. And managing that via Zoom is you've got a better chance of it raining here in Dubai.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look. Let's just go down the self-management hole. We've got people, generations, plural, who are into social media, television before that, and it's the instant gratification that has,
Yeah.
in a way, rotted our brains, our capacity to do things that take a long time.
And no responsibility.
And yes, and if you heard that, there's the responsibility, and it's hard enough with students to get to take pride in their work. And once that's why I always like when we got to the concerts, you could see that look on their face, like, yeah, see, you did it.
Yeah, lights change you,
Yeah, when you have to go out and do it in front of somebody, then they realize that all the time you were telling them to do it and do it and do it and do it, they say, oh, this is boring, or this is just repetitive. And it's like, but to be an artist, to be good at anything, you need to put in the reps. You have
to put in the reps.
You have to do it. So when you go out there, they see their performers online or YouTube or whatever, and they make it look easy. Well, they make it look easy because there's a lot of stuff you don't see performers doing.
That's interesting though. Like, why? Because to us as performers, it's common sense. But
Mm-hmm.
when they see these people on TikTok or Instagram that are releasing this content, why do people think that it's easy? Like, that's one thing that I never understood, why people, especially our students, don't kind of see that concept of time investment. It takes 30 hours of work for a 45-minute performance, and I don't understand like where that's being lost in translation.
Well, I think that there's a lot of stuff on TikTok and Twitter or whatever, the viral videos where the person is showing that they have a talent to do a thing. And there's a difference between sort of the talent and work ethic. Case in point, when I was in university, we would always get new freshmen coming in every year, and they had auditioned well and they played really well, and they came in, and within the first 3 months, it's like, okay, yeah, you have talent, but now you got to work. You've been able to prove that
you got to go to class.
Yeah, your talent was this big in a world that's keeps getting even bigger, and then you've got to be able to humble yourself and say, okay, now I don't know everything, so I need to get on board and work. So the thing is, like, when people go to a live concert and you're dealing with people who've been doing it, you got to realize that they've been doing it for 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40 years.
Yeah.
And that's what you're hearing that the years of dedication and a lot of stuff you don't see sitting in a practice room, banging your head against a wall to learn a passage, all these things to get it right, so that when the audience hears it, they don't hear any mistakes. There are no mistakes.
Right. And when you see, like on TikTok and stuff, when you see these people that go viral, when you actually look at their profile, you see they've been posting those same videos for 5 years. Like they
Mm-hmm.
just now went viral, but even then you get to
Mm-hmm.
see that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a bunch of digital platforms here,
Mm-hmm.
especially with education. We talked about Hook Theory, Soundtrap, which are
Mm-hmm.
both like music production tools. I'm going to give you a 30-second elevator pitch for what we do here at
All right.
Common Time. And I want to hear your thoughts on how you could have maybe used this or how you could use this in the future.
Okay.
So, Common Time, which we are meeting on right now, is a purpose built artist ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
that is working to connect educators, schools, and arts organizations with the artists that need them.
Mm-hmm.
This service is all inclusive, so everything down from scheduling to selecting an artist from our network of artists to the actual physical video conferencing that we're doing now is all in house. So if I'm going to put on my hat and pretend to be Lars Jefferson for
Mm-hmm.
today, what I would do is sign up for an educator on this as an educator on this platform.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say for one of my virtual classes that you were doing on that gnarly 16 hours, I was 12 hours. You can go into our list of artists and select from, there's all types of artists on there. We've got Persian musicians, there's a harpsichord specialist, there are dancers and choreographers and even
Mm-hmm.
drama specialists on there. I myself am a Common Time artist as well. And you can beam those artists directly into your classes using this platform. So does that sound like something that you could have used, especially during virtual learning? Now I know for us in Xi'an, we oftentimes brought musicians in. So
Mm-hmm.
that whole concept of bringing in outside musicians into your class is not anything new to you. But how
Mm-hmm.
do you think you could have used a service like that that basically handed you a little black book of people and allowed you to schedule them and bring them into your classes on this virtual platform?
Oh, for sure. Um, because like you and I are different generations, but like the one thing that I noticed, now I'm going back here, when you're in high school and you might go to a band festival or a choir festival and stuff, and also being a director, I think you and I have seen this. When you go there and the judge or the clinician says the same thing you have been telling, because
Right,
sometimes
right,
the students say, well, that's just our music teacher. Oh, well, somebody with a PhD now says it, so it
right.
must be more.
Now it's real.
Yeah, you get it in there. So to bring in that same person, even if they're going to say the same thing, that you've been beating your kids over the head, fine. They can hear it from somebody else, and maybe they'll believe it this time. The other thing is that you know even like Xi'an is a good sized city of 12 million people. Um,
Small fishing village.
Small fishing. um, I wouldn't eat anything that came out of that river, though. Ugh. I know you were obsessed with catfishing, but anyway. The getting inter people in, scheduling them, paying them. There's the whole schedule thing, and then we had our deal with our finance office that was not always easy to work with. Just to be able to schedule something and say, hey, I want to have this here now at this time, that's huge.
Yeah. And
And
it's all inclusive. We this service operates on PayPal, so some of that finance office problems will probably still be there,
yep.
but it is definitely on demand
Yeah. So
for
the having
sure.
the on demand or being able to schedule a time where I'm not having to, work around and, ask your principal, "Well, can I bust these kids out of class at this time because this is the only time the
Right.
artist can come?" That's huge. Also, the versatility. I've done, years of IB music where you want to bring in so the student's a performer or something on something that's just there's a difference between listening to a recording of it and having a person actually play it for you. The best would
And seeing it.
coming into your room would be the most amazing thing. um but having being able to make a call to some a tabla player in India and say, hey, can you log on at this time and we're going to talk tabla for
Right.
that's awesome.
And one thing that's cool, especially coming from, because IB talks about context so much.
Mhm.
So when we do a lot here at Common Time with artist development. So once artists come onto our roster, we try to give them some tools and help them produce their best content.
Mhm.
And one thing that we stress to them is to actually, before their session, maybe have a conversation with the educator to customize that session for what they need.
That's
So, for
excellent.
example, in the old DP, when they had to take that test about world music, maybe you would tell, we actually do have a tabla player on the roster. The name slips me, but it's there. You could actually tell that tabla player, in addition to maybe showcasing your playing, can
Mhm.
you give us a little bit of your personal
Yeah.
interaction with the history, of
Mhm.
the genre, with the history of the instrument, so that
Mhm.
it's kind of directly tying into exactly what you need. I
Mhm.
think you kind of hit the nail on the head as far as what this service is trying to provide. And I think in a world where we're trying to reach people, especially when pretty much the whole world is hybrid
Mhm.
at any time, my hometown school district tried to open. They lasted 2 weeks before they had to close down again. So I've definitely got to call some of those arts teachers down there and get them on Common Time. And that leads me to my next question. So, just in a year, we've seen this crazy forward shift in education. Now,
Mhm.
me personally, I think when I think about the future of education, now I don't want to get tinfoil here, okay? But I think automation's definitely coming. And I think in 50 years, services like Common Time will become instrumental because I kind of see the future of learning
Mhm.
being this interdisciplinary,
Mhm.
personal approach just
Mhm.
because of the fact that half of the jobs don't exist. So
Mhm.
we're going to get to a point where like that liberal arts education is kind of the best thing you could really do for yourself
Mhm.
because there's not going to be any more assembly line workers. There are not going to
Mhm.
be any more factory jobs.
Yeah.
And I think education in 50, maybe 100 years, it's kind of going to look like students using a service like Common Time to just take different classes, learn different
Mhm.
things. I think coding and content creation is going to be a big part of that. I think one of the biggest assets that you'll own in the next 50 years is your own story.
Mhm.
Because when we live in a world where everything is done for us for the most part,
Mhm.
I think the only thing that you can really create is going to be content. And I think we're going to get to this point where it's people learning niche skills and then presenting that niche to the world. Kind of like how there's been this boom in streaming services. I think
Mhm.
it's going to be like everyone's got their own streaming service.
Mhm.
And with the 7 billion people on planet, we'll just be subscribing to the ones we like. And I just want to ask you, given everything you've seen up to this point, what do you think education is going to look like in another 20, 50, 100 years.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I think we have overestimated um, the need for actual human connection in education. Because, like, when I was going to school 20 years ago, um, people were saying, in the future, kids will be able just to get up and go to their computer and learn, and the world will be better and whatnot. Well, technically, we do have that ability now. It's not ironed out, but you still want to be able to have that connection. So I don't see a time where we're ever going to get rid of either classrooms or one-to-one personal interaction, because there's that whole part of cultivating a relationship, and it's really hard to have a relationship with a student when you only see them online. They
Yeah.
if you have a previous one-to-one relationship, that's one thing, but if I had to start cold online with students that I'd never seen, that's pretty hard, because there's other things that, like, one of the things that I found difficult teaching online was that I read students. I read their body language. I read the nonverbal cues. I read all those things to really get a feel whether they're actually getting it or not. When I'm online and it's just my camera pointing in one direction, I can't do that. So there is something to say about the having a person in the room. I see more of a hybrid where a teacher, say in like your case, rural Georgia or Wyoming or wherever, wants to introduce their students to something that they just don't have. Yeah, definitely, for sure. Make that possible. Um, as far as content creation, I don't know. We're in this era now where, like, everybody has a podcast. I mean, you just go look on Spotify or YouTube and just put in podcast. It's like it's content overload. So
Yeah.
we're all agree with you on the liberal arts, an education that teaches students how to think. Because, like, one of the things that we're really fighting in society right now, and this um, can be applied to the arts too, is good information versus disinformation versus bad information versus people who don't know anything about what they're talking about. And you have, if you think critically, you can sort through it. It's a mess. Yes, it's hard. It's not fun. But let's put this to the in the arts. There's a lot of music, and that I think there was an article I read that it was like pop music in the last, I want to say, 30 or 40 years has gotten so simple. It's very formulaic, very predictable. I mean, that's the reason why they call it pop music. It sounds the same, because you can see you can figure out the formulas about what the tempo, what the drum beat, what the chord progression, all this stuff,
Yeah.
because they figured out what sells. That's why they call it the music industry. It's what sells. It's not necessarily music that makes you crazy. It's music that makes you sell. And as artists, to be able to get the students to understand the difference between that and, say, major pieces of Western or world music that make you go, wow. Because there was that YouTube video where I forget, some guy puts on Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Maybe you've seen it for the first time, and he's like just going, "Oh my God, I've never heard anything like this!" Just wow, he's in tears.
Just blown away.
He's just in tears because he didn't even know it existed.
Wow.
So
I can't even imagine hearing that for the first time again.
yeah. So there's a lot of um, to be able to understand that there is something that's transcendent in music that we can bring about through the art, rather than just creating more garbage to listen to because anybody can do that.
Mhm.
But to really get to understand the difference between say Justin Bieber and I mean let's just even keep it in the great rock and roll band. Justin Bieber versus the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Not even in the same park, but to understand why they're not even in the same park. So
Right. And I think Common Time helps with that too,
yeah.
because I remember I used to do mindful listening
Mm-hmm.
sessions
Mm-hmm.
where I tried to introduce the students to, I guess, quote, good music, at least by my standard.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the same, like you said, as having a tabla player really there.
Oh
It's
yeah.
almost tactile in a sense,
Yeah.
where you can see those wrist movements and you
Mm-hmm.
see his mouth, and you can kind of see, even if you don't understand the music, just by seeing the artistry.
Yeah.
It's kind of like jazz.
Yeah.
Everyone doesn't like jazz, but when you see somebody just
Yeah.
shredding on the saxophone,
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, whatever they're doing is great. I
Yeah.
may not understand it, it's definitely new to me,
Mm-hmm.
but just
Yeah.
seeing people actually do things. I was having a conversation with a coworker about how students watch other kids play games on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the whole concept of just doing something
Yeah.
has become a lost art to some.
Mm-hmm.
And Common Time kind of helps bridge that gap by
Yeah.
bringing in doers to your classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are some good thoughts on the future of education. Just moving forward here, I've got just two more questions for you, Lars. I want to ask you, if you were to think really quickly on bringing someone into your classroom, what is the perfect session that you would want a guest artist to do? For any of the classes that you've taught, you could bring in anyone you want. What is the perfect guest artist session that you would like to see and that you would think would be the most impactful? Maybe for context, we can say from an MYP perspective in the IB, since that's what we were doing.
Okay.
What do you think could be your ideal guest artist situation?
Um, let's go with say maybe a composer,
Mm-hmm.
and so students can actually see maybe their workflow, how they come up with ideas, how they wrestle with ideas, um, because like one of the things that you and I both would run into, especially in our Asian context, was sometimes students just want to say, well, now what? Well, what do I do? And I said, try something.
Right.
Just getting them just to like go to the keyboard and play the thing and do that and have somebody else other than me or you model that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they can see the that they're maybe people that they listen to or songwriters or whatever, see how they approach problems and realize that it's more about the journey rather than the product. And yeah, you do have the odd songwriter who wrote lyrics on the back of a napkin and figured out the song in 45 minutes, but that's the exception, not the rule. Really to delve into a personal process. I would try to
Right.
embed the students with my process, um, where I would sketch out something and then flesh it out later and whatnot. But that doesn't always work for some students. So maybe different approaches to composition. That's like maybe drastically different than the way that I normally would. As far as performance goes, if you could have like a master class for the leaders in your group, on how to lead
Mm.
your section, how to sort of embody the best traits that you want everybody to look up to, of course, you'd want them to show it to your your band or your orchestra or choir. But what are the not just the good techniques, but what are the elements of being a leader in your group?
Yeah, leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That's I was actually just talking to my wife about leadership. I like that you mentioned kind of an ideal session for you would be with a composer,
Mm-hmm.
because when you look at the DP
Mm-hmm.
and you look at IGCSE music,
Mm-hmm.
the powers that be have really decided that a major part of music education needs to be composition.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at my own music education
Yeah.
experience, I took AP music theory in high school, but without that, I never would have composed or arranged anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then in college, I don't think maybe once or twice I was asked to arrange something. Maybe in a marching band methods
Mm-hmm.
class, I arranged something.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back on it, I kind of feel like, wow, all these different curriculums in the world have determined that music composition is like super important. Yet that's one area that I
Mm-hmm.
really did very little.
Mm-hmm.
I think I could compose something now, but it would be sheer willpower. Like I don't have any type of
Mm-hmm.
process. I would just be able to compose something
Mm-hmm.
just based on pure knowledge, but not any actual in context work or practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really interesting that you said that that'd be something that's important to you.
Yeah, I mean, and in the last 20 years, you know, composing in schools was sort of like the high end thing, just because let's just admit it, it was a real pain in the butt because you didn't have notation software, you didn't have things, you had to write it out by hand. If you had to edit it, you had to go out and rewrite it out again. As far as music composition goes, it's probably the latest comer technology wise. So now there's really no excuse to not do it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And you introduced me to stuff like this that
Yay.
actually helped
Yay.
students learn how to compose, and in turn helped me. One last question, Lars, and then we'll get you out of here. What music are you listening to these days?
What am I listening to?
I'm gonna look back through my phone, and so I can tell you what I've been listening to. But yeah, what have you been listening to?
Well, I'm back home and we have KLOO 106.3 classic rock. That's what's in my car right now.
Okay.
um and you know what? I haven't really listened to a lot on my phone lately, so
People don't talk about this, but being a musician, listening to music isn't always happy, fun time.
no,
Like
it's not.
like it is for other people. It's not always. Sometimes it's work.
Well,
That's why I like podcasts. It seems
here's
easier to
here's the
listen
other
to.
thing. It's like, and you probably had this happen where you're at a party or a social gathering or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, well, he's the music teacher. He can lead the song." It's like, no,
No,
that's my day job. I don't want to do it.
just last week, my new school that I work at now is a brand new school. So they've had we've pretty much been in workshops for the past 3 weeks where they've been bringing in like a PYP guy, bringing in an MYP guy. We're using this new learning management system and this and that. So anywho, our actual MYP coordinator is a workshop leader. So she's running the MYP. It's basically Cat 1, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So we come back from a snack break, and she goes, "All right, Michael, lead us in an activity and get our brains going." So I think I did some like repeat after me like body percussion thing, and I was just looking really confused. But I guess the people were moving, and I'm assuming their brains got turned on. For me, Kim bought Millie, my little baby, this Dark Side of the Moon onesie. So I've been playing Pink Floyd for her the
There you
past few
go.
days. And I have to admit, I've never actually listened to Dark Side of the Moon. I
Mm-hmm.
know it,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually played it down like top to bottom, and it's classic.
Mm-hmm.
It's classic.
Apparently, you're supposed to be able to hit play at the beginning of Wizard of Oz, and it lines up really well as a soundtrack. I've heard that.
With the movie?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like the whole album? If you
Yeah.
start there,
If you sync them together, it works.
what?
Yeah.
Let me save that song so I can. All right, I might try that. Lars, I want to thank you for taking this time to help me on this new project we're working on. Once again, this is Common Time One on One, something where us here on the Common Time team want to bring in some of the artists, musicians, dancers, actors, writers, and other creatives in this industry that are doing the work just to kind of get some of their views on their art, some of their views on the internet and education, and some of their views on how they think our platform can add to what they're doing. So, once again, Lars, I want to tell you thank you. I appreciate you. I miss you. Hopefully this summer, I'm not sure when we're coming back to the States, but hopefully we can get back together. And yeah, we kind of left on random terms, and I definitely still need some closure
Yeah.
about the whole Shion experience, but I'm hoping one day we can make that happen
Okay.
sometime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Thank you, Lars.
Yeah. You're welcome.